What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. We are rolling through the All 32 as we take a look at every single NFL team, or at least until we get to the Jaguars and then give up because nobody cares about them and Pete Prisco won't come on to talk about them. Make sure to download, subscribe, rate, review, 5-star review. If you have a question about a specific team you want us to cover or any specific person you want to talk to or a question about a specific team, let us know and we'll dive into it. We have two more to go to wrap up the AFC East and NFC East in our first week of this series. And we're going to talk Jets with Manish Mehta at MMetaNYDN on Twitter. Covers the Jets. And, of course, the NFL as a whole for the New York Daily News. Manish, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Will. What's going on?
I'm good. I mean, we're in day – I don't know. Whatever we're in. Yeah, I mean, but yeah. And, I mean, I would assume that your – geographical location makes the quarantine perhaps more difficult, or is that not the case?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a little bit more constrained here than it is down south, that's for sure.
Right.
Things are relaxing. Hopefully that's a good thing. So over the next few weeks, things are going to get not necessarily back to normal, but at least a better semblance of what normal is. Yeah,
for sure. And normal means that we can start talking about Adam Gase again. Because who doesn't like to talk about Adam Gase? I think the Jets. So I've sort of been kind of pounding the table, and I know you tweeted about Sam Darnold. Let's see, we're recording this on Thursday. Today is Friday, June 5th. When people are listening, we record on Thursday. I think on Wednesday you tweeted that Sam Darnold might be the best quarterback in the AFC East, and I know that you like to sort of poke people with the Darnold tweets and all that, but I might agree with you. Or maybe he's the best. He's better than anybody on the Patriots. What was the tweet? I think there's some semblance of reality here that Sam Darnold is being overlooked in the ranking of the AFC East quarterbacks.
Well, I do think he's the best quarterback in the AFC East. Yesterday or earlier in the week, I should say, I was specifically referring to Darnold versus what Bill Belichick is working with this year, and Jarrett Stidham and Hoyer. Look, I think he will ultimately be proven to be the best quarterback in the division. Clearly, Josh Allen and his team have had more success to this point, and I think that's going to continue, at least from a team standpoint. I think Buffalo is the best team in this division, and I know seeing is believing, but I believe that they will win the division this year. But just from a skill set standpoint, as a quarterback, I would take Darnold over Josh Allen, clearly over Stidham. Obviously, Tua's a question mark at this point, but he's got all the raw skills. I'm sure you've talked about it as well, Will. He's got a ton of potential. For me, the next step would be what can the play caller do for him, and what can his surrounding pieces around him do for him in terms of elevating his game to the next natural level.
Well, I mean, I think the pieces around him and the Adam Gase factor, are sort of what maybe that's why people are not very bullish on the Jets heading into 2020. I mean, look, what Minkah Fitzpatrick traded, blows up. Ryan Tannehill traded, wins I think he would comeback player of the year. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Yeah, and then Kenyon Drake traded, immediately becomes like a featured bell cow back on another team. It almost feels like everybody that Adam Gase, it's whatever the reverse Midas touch is. Does that where are you at on Adam Gase? And do you he had great success with Peyton Manning, but he hasn't done a whole lot elsewhere. I tend to think he's a smarter offensive mind than people are giving him credit for now. But all the press conferences, it's such a weird thing with him that he would go to New York and be standoffish. I like where do we stand on Adam Gase as it relates to sort of the fan base and with ownership?
Well, Will, you forgot about Devontae Parker having his last year.
That's my guy, too. Yeah.
Right. Even Mike Gesicki had a pretty good second season as well without Gase. Look, it's a complicated question. I think if you look at this objectively, you have to divide Adam Gase's NFL career with Peyton Manning and without Peyton Manning. He's been in the NFL for 17 seasons in a number of different capacities, whether it was position coach, offensive coordinator, even scout in the beginning. He's only been a part of a winning culture, so a winning team in 4 of those 17 seasons. So he's been surrounded by a lot of losing, whether it was San Francisco, Detroit, Chicago, Miami, and obviously most recently New York. He's had a great amount of success in 3 of those seasons with Peyton Manning. He's only been part of a winning organization once in his career, or 2-decade career without Peyton. So he's got a lot to prove in terms of trying to actually convince people that he can be a winning piece to the formula without arguably one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the history of football. So he's 30-35 as a head coach for a reason. He's 9-24 on the road as a head coach for a reason. His offenses without Peyton Manning, I believe, were something like 24, 25, 27, 31, and most recently dead last, 32nd. So that's a fair concern. And I think the reason, in fact, I know the reason the Jets hired him was to bring out the best in Sam Darnold, because they believed that he had the skill set to do that. And I'm with you, Will, in that I believe that he has good ideas. He's not a dummy. I tend to take less stock in the press conferences than maybe the average fan does. Yeah, they're unusual. He's a peculiar guy, mercurial guy. But that doesn't have anything to do, in my opinion, with how good or bad of a coach he is. I think the results speak for themselves. And he did not bring out the best in Darnold last year. Excuse me. Now, Darnold had incremental improvement, but it wasn't that seismic leap that people were hoping for from year 1 to year 2, much like we saw in Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen has a lot of room to grow, but he clearly made progress in year 2. With Darnold, more of a mixed bag. So that's why people are wondering, can he make that significant jump from year 2 to year 3?
Yeah, I mean, the press conference thing is like, it's probably overblown. It's just, you can't go to, you know this as well as anybody, because you've covered the Jets for a really long time. Like, if you go to New York and you're an a-hole, you better win. Because if you don't, you're getting if you go to New York and you show up with a baseball cap on and pull it over your eyes, and then you're like staring at the taco Titanic thing. I mean, it's like a meme and it's not real, but it's like, it does sort of feel like that's what happened,
Yeah, look, I think there's some inherent securities that he has, and I'm not a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination. But the bottom line is production. I think one of the most underplayed elements of Adam Gase as a head coach is not about X's and O's. It's about leadership. And I think there is a leadership void with him. I do not believe that he is a good enough leader to succeed. Now, he has good leaders around him. He has some strong people around him. At least from a football coaching standpoint, Greg Williams is a guy who dealt with a lot of similar things on the defensive side of the ball last year, but the defense was extremely productive. It wasn't a top 5 defense by any stretch, but he dealt with losing the quarterback of his defense, C.J. Mosley, for the majority of the season. And the Jets, I don't want to say didn't miss a beat, but they were clearly an extremely efficient unit on that side of the ball. And again, he's got a young, talented quarterback who I think can also perhaps mask some of the coach's deficiencies. But leadership is a real question. And I think if you're being honest with yourself in that building, you know that there are some leadership issues with this guy. And I don't think they were solved at all based on the information that I got behind the scenes. I don't think he solved any of that, frankly. I don't think he learned much from what happened in Miami. And that was a concern, Will, going from one head coaching job, fired after 3 seasons, immediately to becoming a head coach again without having a year or so to kind of learn from your mistakes, perhaps as a coordinator somewhere else. He got that other job right away. I think that emboldened him, to think that, hey, what I was doing in Miami wasn't wrong. The problem was with the Dolphins, not with me. And I think that manifested itself, frankly, with what happened with him in the Jets last season.
I think we've seen that a lot, and it's weird. Like, coaches almost don't get that. Not that like you shouldn't take a head coaching job, because they're rare, they're hard to get. I mean, there's only 32 of them. Like some of these dudes will hold on to these forever. I mean, Bill Belichick's been doing it for 20 years, but like Chip Kelly when he went to the 49ers, Rex Ryan when he went to the Bills, it's like, just take a year off, like reset. Like, you're rich. You're going to get another job. Like you're showing that you can clearly get another job. It's almost better to like hit the pause button, take a step back, sort of reevaluate what you're doing. And you're right. Like, Adam Gase didn't have time to do that because he immediately took the Jets job in the same division, with a team and a franchise that just hasn't been stable for ever really. And I feel bad for him in a sense, because like Sam Darnold getting mono, I mean, that's the most preposterous storyline on the planet. And this team did play well down the stretch. But, Manish, when you look at the depth chart, I mean, I believe in Darnold. I just have questions about whether this offense can take a big step forward based on the weapons around him.
I agree. I thought one of the missteps that Joe Douglas made this offseason was not retaining Robbie Anderson, not because I think Robbie Anderson's an all-pro player. He hasn't made an all-pro team, hasn't been a Pro Bowler, but because he was an ascending young player who was developing a rapport with your most indispensable asset, the quarterback. So he and Darnold were developing something good, and you could see that. I've watched every snap that the quarterback has made since he came into the NFL, and every snap that Robbie Anderson has played since he came into the NFL, and something good was happening there, and they did not allow that to continue because they did not want to pay an extra, $3-4 million, whatever it ended up being, and they brought in Brashad Perryman. And look, if you play fantasy football, you remember Brashad Perryman's December. He probably won you some fantasy leagues, right?
Yeah.
So he was extremely effective in the last month, in the most recent month of his career. However, the prior 3 or 4 years were a complete bust, and I don't even think that Brashad Perryman would debate that. So he is an unknown. I don't know what he is going to be for the Jets this year. He signed on a 1-year deal. It's essentially a trial season for him. You've got Denzel Mims, who I do like. He is a rookie, so you do have to manage your expectations. I think he can be an important contributor for Darnold in the long run, but I don't know what you're going to get out of 2020. Jamison Crowder, to me, was exceptional as a slot guy. But I'm with you. I think that, I don't know if there's adequate weaponry, and not only in the skill position players, but the offensive line as well. It's a whole new offensive line, 4 new starters. It's an unusual offseason, so these guys did not have an opportunity in the spring to at least start to lay the foundation as a unit. They're going to have to do that in training camp, so it's going to be kind of a crash course. And we probably buried the lead, Will. We have not talked about how incredibly poor Le'Veon Bell was deployed last year.
Yeah,
it wasn't long ago, right?
Was it the Monday night game against the Browns where who was it? Who was starting? Was it Fales? David Fales started.
Trevor
Siemian started, and they were like, "All right, look, we got nothing. We're just going to run Le'Veon Bell into the middle of the line like 400 times and just hope that he breaks one."
Yeah, and that was another failure on Gase's part. I mean, you have a player who arguably was the best running back in the NFL when he last played in Pittsburgh. I think his final game in Pittsburgh was a playoff game against Jacksonville, in which he had 150 total yards and 3 touchdowns. So he clearly had it when he came to the Jets. I know he took a year off for financial reasons, but
sure.
He averaged, I think it was 3.2 yards a carry. Le'Veon Bell is not necessarily a home run hitter, but he's not a 3.2 yards per carry type of back. I don't think he was used properly at all. He clearly was not the focal point of the offense for the majority of the season. And that kind of traces back to what happened in free agency. Adam Gase did not want Le'Veon Bell. It did not have anything to do with the money initially until word got out that he didn't want Bell. And then he kind of changed the narrative, or attempted to change the narrative behind the scenes by saying he did not want to pay that kind of money for a running back. And I don't discount that at all. He didn't want to pay that kind of money for a running back. That being said, in a vacuum, he did not want to restructure his offense to run through a running back. That's not what he does. He likes running backs by committee. He likes to spread the wealth. He likes an offense to be very much like a basketball team in which you have 4 or 5 different options. You saw that in Denver. You've seen that really every step along the way. He doesn't want the running back to be the focal point, and he basically had to do that because the general manager and the owner wanted to bring in Bell, and you clearly saw that it did not work last year. This is going to be Le'Veon Bell's last year with the Jets before he gets cut and his guaranteed money runs out after this season. So I will be very interested to see if there's a true commitment on the head coach's part to at least get this very talented player more involved in the right way.
I mean, at the very least, like, I get it. Like, I get it. I agree with you. And you said it. Like, I don't want to pay a running back. Nobody wants to pay a running back, but you already paid him and he's there. So maybe don't gaslight him in the media before the season even starts. And then at least have the foresight to realize that if you don't want to run your offense through a running back, you could still utilize one of the best pass catching running backs in
Exactly.
frankly, the history of the NFL. Like Le'Veon Bell's an incredible route runner and a great pass catcher. He got 78 targets last year and he played 15 games. Like it doesn't line up. Like this guy should be getting the ball in space in the passing game a ton. It was really disappointing by Gase.
Yeah, look, it's stubborn. It's really not being flexible and adapting to your talent. The best coaches adapt to their talent, right? And Adam Gase, he offers a lot of lip service. I'll say this about Gase. He's an extremely good salesperson. He absolutely is. He's a good salesman to ownership that helped him get the job. He's a good salesman to some of his players that initially believe in him and then over time kind of get a better sense that actions speak louder than words. And Adam Gase's actions as a head coach dating back to Miami kind of reveals what he is all about. So he can say whatever he wants privately to players to get them juiced up, to get them amped about a season. But, the proof is in the pudding. And he did not deploy Le'Veon the right way. You had mentioned Chip Kelly, which I think is a great example of a guy who did not adapt to a quality running back when he had him in 2015. DeMarco Murray was coming off his best season. He was arguably the best.
Even signed him. It's like he signed him. It's like, what are you doing?
It's incredible. And he had his worst season. And then after Chip was fired, the Eagles traded DeMarco to Tennessee. And then you saw a little bit of the Dallas DeMarco in Tennessee. And I think I know that Le'Veon Bell's got some mileage and he's older, but I think when Le'Veon Bell finds a new home in 2021, you're going to see a little bit more of what we remember from Pittsburgh.
That's a great. I like the DeMarco Murray comp. Yeah, I mean, he ran for 1,287 or almost 1,300 yards when he landed in Tennessee. All right, well, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will discuss some Jets defense. Okay, so I don't know who you give credit for. Maybe you just blame Dave Gettleman, but like the Leonard Williams deal. I mean, Merry Christmas, Jets. What a steal is. You hate to lose a guy that you drafted that highly, but the Jets don't really have anybody on the roster, frankly, like that they drafted from 2013 to 2016 or 17. It's awful what Mike Maccagnan and how am I forgetting who's before Maccagnan? How am I blanking on
John Idzik?
Yeah, Idzik. Oh my God.
Idzik.
Yeah, I always called him Joe Philbin, which I guess would be fine because they sort of remind me of each other. But like Idzik, I mean, I remember Idzik meeting at the owners' meetings in I think it was maybe Arizona, and he's had some this guy had nothing. Like I mean, just he was just a cap. But so I'll ask you this: who was worse, Idzik or Maccagnan?
Well, I'll say this about Mike Maccagnan. The drafts overall were not good, and the names are right in front of everyone, so they know that. That being said, he did draft the franchise quarterback that this franchise has been looking for about a half a century, and he did draft their best player, their only all-pro player in Jamal Adams. So even though the vast majority of these picks did not work out, he got two of the best players that this franchise has seen in the last 10 or 15 years.
That is incredibly depressing. I mean, it is if you're a Jets fan. On the Jamal Adams thing, so he wants a new contract. There have been trade rumors for let's say 12 to 18 months now. It feels like he actually came on the podcast at the Super Bowl, and I was just struck talking to him. Like he is. I don't get why the Jets don't want to pay him because, again, they have no one on the roster that's any good that they can actually pay. I mean, you can't even pay Sam Darnold, right? I mean, right. You literally are not allowed to pay Sam Darnold. You've whiffed on all these draft picks, and you have Jamal Adams, who clearly is a locker room leader. He's an all-pro player. Now, granted, he doesn't play a premier position, but he's such an impactful guy. Why are the Jets doing this? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, it's a multi-layered question with a multi-layered answer. Sure. I think, it'll start at the top. A lot of people praised Joe Douglas for doling out these, relatively cheap / affordable contracts in free agency, a lot of one-year deals or de facto one-year deals. And he did that because of the guidance or I guess the parameters that were put in place by ownership. Ownership did not want to spend a lot of cash this year. And so Joe Douglas works around it as best as he can. So it's not as if Douglas was this incredibly shrewd negotiator who did not want to dole out these big money contracts. He just simply could not do it.
He's like, hey, look, my boss, here's what my boss is giving me.
Now, look, he's not going to say that publicly. In fact,
Sure.
I've asked him about that publicly because there clearly was a cash flow issue this year. He's not going to throw ownership under the bus. I totally understand that. But the reality is that was the situation that he was dealing with. So under that umbrella, you have to think if Jamal Adams gets a big contract, he's obviously going to get a fairly sizable signing bonus. And you're going to have to pay that money up front. And cash always matters more than cap. You know, fans get caught up in salary cap space. Can we get this there because we have X amount of dollars in the cap left? Anybody who knows anything about the NFL and how it's structured knows that cash matters much more than cap. And that's what comes down to the ownership's willingness. It comes down to their desire to spend money this year upfront, real money, cash. And that's not the case with the Jets. Their ownership is not allowing them to do that this year. Now, my understanding is that ownership has given the front office assurances that things will be different next year. We'll find out. But in 2020, when we're talking specifically about Jamal Adams, that's a big consideration, the cash. And if you look at his contract structure, he's going to make $3.5 million this year. Technically, he's going to make about $10 million in the fifth-year option next year. The Jets could franchise him not once, potentially twice.
Sure.
So they've got 3 or 4 years of team control over him. If they wanted to play hardball with him, they could. But I'm with you, Will. He is by far their best player. If this is indeed a meritocracy, you cannot look at this roster and say that Jamal Adams has not produced more than anybody else, because he clearly has. The other accomplished players on this roster are C.J. Mosley, who again missed most of last season due to injury, and Le'Veon Bell, who we also talked about. But if we're talking about 2020 moving forward, and a guy who's 25, 26 years old, literally the only all-pro player on the team as a Jet, he deserves to get paid. He deserves to be the highest paid player on the team because, as you said, they're not even paying Sam Darnold. He's on his rookie deal. They could wait another year or two to even pay him. So what do smart organizations do when they have young quarterbacks on their rookie deal? They beef up the surrounding pieces. You saw that with Russell Wilson in Seattle. You're seeing that now with Buffalo and Josh Allen being on his rookie contract. That's what you have to do. You have to lock up players like Jamal Adams. Because if you don't, and you let him walk, when I say walk, when you let him go for a first and a third round pick, how foolish is that? He is a first round pick. He's a top 10 pick. So what are you doing? You're essentially getting an additional third round pick for Jamal Adams. That doesn't make any sense. And you're hoping that the first round pick you get becomes half as good as Jamal Adams? It's absurd. And frankly, it's embarrassing that some of the contract strife or impasse or divide, however you want to describe it, it's embarrassing that has come to the forefront this offseason. I know that the general sentiment is that it's coming from Jamal Adams' side. I can tell you with great certainty it's coming from the New York Jets side. It's not coming from the player's side in this particular case.
Yeah, I mean, he's very clear and honest. He's like, yes, I want to be paid. Yes, I want to be with the Jets. I mean, do I feel a little disrespected? Of course. Like, these trade rumors aren't great. We cleared the air. I mean, it's not like you got to give him $40 million a year either. And this is kind of a stupid, simplified question, but I sort of think it might apply to the Jets. Do you think the stock price of Johnson & Johnson affects like decision making in the like in terms of ownership's willingness to spend? Because like if you look in like in the middle of March, it had dropped like 40 points, and now because people need cleaning supplies, it's it's like it's back up and doing very well. Like I don't want to blow up Christopher Johnson's spot here. I would have no problem blowing up Woody's spot, but like it does feel like that's something that could definitely impact how they make decisions.
Well, look, Woody Johnson is no longer really involved in Johnson & Johnson. He's involved in the Johnson Company. It's a private equity firm, but the Johnson & Johnson stock has no impact on this particular ownership group. I mean, it originated with the family, of course,
sure,
but the Johnson Company is what Woody and Christopher.
So they're not even like they've cashed out of the.
Yeah, I don't believe that there's any significant interest in Johnson & Johnson with those two guys.
I will now stop referencing the Johnson & Johnson stock price when I talk about the Jets. All right, so when you look at this defense, so the Jets to me are a squint team where like if you squint hard enough at the depth chart, like you really like look at it, you're like, okay, I can kind of talk myself into this. And it feels like I'm kind of there on the defense. Like, if assuming Jamal Adams sticks around, if assuming C.J. Mosley can play 16 games, Quinnen Williams, people kind of dogged, but like he's really, really young and making the leap from the NFL, even from Alabama to the NFL. I love the Ashton Davis edition of that. Bryce Hall is a sneaky ad in the 5th round. I don't know if those guys are going to be impact guys out of the gate, but like with Greg Williams and the way he schemes up pressure and all this, I tend to feel like this defense could be at least above average, if not even a little bit better.
Look, I think they overachieved, if you will.
Sure.
And I think that overachieved to Greg Williams. You'll probably take that as an insult because I expect it with Greg Williams. But clearly, I think this is going to be a very competitive defense. Whether they're better statistically than last year or if they repeat what they did last year, that should be good enough to be a successful team. Like the elephant in the room is the daunting schedule. And I know that schedules on paper in the summertime maybe don't necessarily mean that much, but they are playing the NFC West and the AFC West this year. Yep. There is a reason why when you look at the toughest schedules on paper, every team in the AFC East ranks in the top 5 in terms of difficulty. The Patriots are the most, they have the hardest schedule on paper, followed by the Jets, and then the Dolphins and the Bills are also in the top 5. It's because they're playing the NFC West and the AFC West as opposed to last year when they played the anemic NFC East. And even the Jets feasted on that division. So schedule is going to be hard on paper, especially when you're looking at it from a defensive standpoint. You're going to have to go against Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes. And these are elite level players, so it's going to be tough. But I don't think that this defense is going to fall off. As you mentioned, C.J. Mosley comes back. That's a huge boost to them. I also agree with you that Quinnen Williams probably got criticized more than he deserved last year. I know that in the building, they're very high on him. Obviously, everyone's high on Jamal Adams. I'm curious to see, frankly, what the back end does. They added Pierre Desir coming off a down year. He's an aging player. I think he'll be 30 by the time the season begins. But he has done some, quality things in his career. So, look, he's for better or for worse, he's their number 1 cornerback. I can tell you that it'll be a surprise if he fares worse than their number 1 cornerback entering last season, Trumaine Johnson.
Oh my God! I mean, Mike McCagnon, like, dude, just stop spending money on bad players in free agency. Like, you're not going to buy your way to 8 wins or whatever it is. All right, so the schedule, I agree with you completely. Like, I want to buy in on the Jets because I really do think that Sam Darnold can take this big leap forward, even with the questions about the supporting cast around him and the coaching. But, man, I mean, at Buffalo, San Francisco at home, at Indy, and then Denver at home, and then Arizona at home and at LA to start. If the Jets come out, and let's assume nobody gets like Sam Darnold is healthy and plays all these games. If the, right. I mean, it's like that almost like saved Adam Gase's job, right? It's like Mono bailed him out from a bad start. They closed 6-2, but if they start like 1-5, is he getting fired or is he safe enough right now where he's going to get the whole season? I
don't think he's going to get fired during the season unless something catastrophic happens off the field or something historic happens on the field, like they're 0-12 or something outrageous like that. I think he's going to get an opportunity to finish this season. Now, the most interesting dynamic of his future is that Woody Johnson, who's the UK ambassador for the Trump administration, in all likelihood is coming back this year, at the end of this year.
Oh.
He is the owner of the team. Christopher Johnson is the CEO, the acting owner of the team, but Woody actually owns the team. And he, again, in all likelihood, is coming back. We'll see what happens with Trump if he is reelected. My understanding is that Woody's probably coming back regardless. Nothing is set in stone. Well, we'll find out. But obviously, if Trump. So,
but this is not a political. It is frankly like it's like he is the ambassador for Trump's administration. So, if your understanding is that when the election takes place, there will be he will probably be removed from that post. So we're talking like October, November. I mean, like assuming I don't know the ins and out of being an ambassador. Never done it. But like, I mean, presumably he's coming back not like after the season or like right before the season. He's coming back midstream, and if they stink, he might come in and just like lay the hammer down, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when it comes to ambassadorships without getting too much into the
have you had to, because this is one of those weird things where like you had to like dive into this for work, right?
Yeah, look, sometimes let's say for argument's sake Trump does not get reelected,
hypothetically speaking,
right? At that point it would be Joe Biden's decision to hold on to the current ambassador until his ambassador choice replaces Woody Johnson. I mean, that could be in November, December, January. That depends. I mean, there's no hard and fast rules on that. But I think it's fair to say this for purposes of this discussion. If Trump were not reelected, Woody would be back in time.
Woody is out if Trump is not reelected. I know
Woody Johnson would not. Yes, he would not.
I don't know much about ambassadorship, but I know. Long story short, I know somebody who was an ambassador in the Bush administration to the Turks and Caicos. Now, you don't get that, you don't get that because you're political savvy, right?
Right.
You get that for financial reasons. And so, again, Woody Johnson has, there are records of this. He is supportive of the current administration, which means that if the election doesn't go their way, he is almost certainly coming back in November.
Yeah, he'll be back. And the reason that he was appointed was because he was significantly involved in fundraising, donor. Yes. Woody Johnson doesn't have any kind of political background. So that's typically the case with a lot of these ambassadorships. If you are involved in fundraising, it depends on the country. Obviously, some countries are much more pivotal than the UK. And we have a really good relationship, meaning America, with the UK. So not all ambassadorships are created equally. I'll put it that way. But the bottom line is that, look, he'll be back if Trump is not reelected, and then he will make the decision on whether to move on from Adam Gase or to keep him on. What's interesting is that if you know anything about Woody Johnson, you know that he really listens to the fan base, and some people might say to a fault he listens to a fan base. That's what some people might say. He has not been in this country very long. He's come back at different times, different pockets of time during his ambassadorship, but he hasn't felt the vitriol, the current vitriol, the wrath of the fan base when it comes to this particular head coach. He's aware of it. He's fully briefed on this kind of stuff from overseas, but it's a lot different when you're living in Manhattan and you're feeling it day to day. And I think if things go south, it'll be very difficult for Adam Gase to come back. Look, if they make the playoffs, if they have a winning record, that obviously increases Gase's chances to return for a third season. And I think that Woody Johnson might do that. But if we're talking about a 5 or 6 win season, I think it'd be very difficult for Woody Johnson to retain Gase.
Yeah, and look, you're spot on about Woody listening to fans. I mean, Woody. I mean, look, he owns a team. He can do whatever he wants, but you could see it in terms of which way is the wind blowing. That's which way Woody's going. You could tell what Woody was going to do based on which way the wind was blowing. All right, so we'll get you out of here on this. What do you think? So, what is a good season for the Jets?
I think they have to have a winning record.
Okay.
And we already talked about the daunting schedule. I don't really care. This is a bottom line business. This is a franchise who has not made the playoffs for 9 consecutive seasons. And I'm not putting on 9 seasons on Adam Gase at all. That's unfair. However, if he misses the playoffs for a second consecutive season, making it 10 years in a row for this team, only Tampa and Cleveland has a longer playoff drought than the Jets. The Jets are at 9 and running. Tampa, I believe, is at 12. The Browns are in a whole different league at 17 years. But after those 3, there's a big fall off. I think the next team that has had the longest playoff drought is somewhere in the 4-year range, something like that. So 10 years is unacceptable. And again, it's not all Adam Gase's fault. But if this team does not have a winning record, and if this quarterback does not make a significant jump, then why are you keeping Adam Gase? You brought him here to quickly develop this quarterback. You brought him here to end this playoff drought. And if he hasn't delivered in 2 years, and he hasn't delivered for him as a head coach for 4 consecutive years after making the playoffs in his first year in Miami, there's no reason to keep him, in my opinion.
Oh man, I can see. I can see this private jet touching down at LaGuardia or wherever Woody Johnson comes in. He gets this alert on his phone. It's a New York Daily News alert. It's Meta : Gase has lost locker room. And it's this guy is in trouble. But you can. I'm with you. I think the other thing too that's a factor is, and this matters. We've talked about this in our podcast with Adam Beasley on the Dolphins and Matthew Fairburn on the Bills. Tom Brady's departure matters. Unfortunately for Adam Gase, there's everybody who is not the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills all of a sudden feel like they have a window to rush in and steal the AFC East for the first time in 20 years. Whether that's real or not, it doesn't matter because there's an expectation from ownership and the fan base that they should do something like that.
No, absolutely. And look, publicly, I don't think you're going to get very many coaches saying that. In fact, I think coaches will say the exact opposite. They want to temper expectations, of course. You mentioned a good point, Will, about losing the locker room. And then last year people said, look, they started off 1-7. I think they finished 5-2. Technically the record books will say they finished 6-2, but they won a de facto preseason game in week 17 against the Bills JV team.
That's right. That's fair.
A game, by the way, in which the Bills at one point lined up a wide receiver at cornerback because their second stringers got hurt. And it was an obvious preseason game.
And they only won 13-6, by the way. They didn't stomp the Bills.
Out. So I look at the 2019 season as a 6-9 season. History would obviously remember them as a 7-9 season. The bottom line, unless things change dramatically, is that Adam Gase is viewed inside that locker room as the offensive coordinator. Every defensive player of consequence that I have talked to privately has said they view Greg Williams as their leader, as their head coach. There's a clear divide in that team, offense and defense. I'm not saying they're fighting, that not at all. They support each other. But if you talk to defensive players, they're not looking at Adam Gase as their leader. They look at Greg Williams as their leader. I don't believe that's going to change. I don't believe there's going to be any kind of anarchy, only because the defensive players believe in Greg Williams. Now, I will also tell you that players on both sides have told me a lot of interesting things about their head coach, things that they will not tell people publicly. And there's a reason why I say that he is not a good leader. And that's not something that I wake up in the morning and think up in my mind. That's coming from people inside the organization. And I think that's telling. And again, he has an opportunity to change that every day he wakes up. He has an opportunity to change that this year. We'll see if he takes advantage of that opportunity.
I still can't get past the fact that he told everybody he skipped Thanksgiving with his family, and then he went out and got stomped by the Bengals.
Look, he is an unusual person. And again, I am not a psychologist. And there are many things that I know about him that aren't things that I'm willing to share.
Sure.
But he's a very unusual person. And I think that's probably the simplest, most accurate way of putting it.
All right. I could talk to you about Adam Gase for all day long. Manish Mehta of the New York Daily News. Thank you so much for taking the time. Awesome stuff as always. Make sure and read him at the New York Daily News. You will read something about Adam Gase at some point in this coming season. I can promise you that. And follow him at MMeta NYDN on Twitter. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Take care.